They say that every dark cloud has a silver lining, but do you know how to mine that silver and spin it into gold? We're going to talk about that. Welcome to another episode of The Good, Bad, and Ugly of Business. I'm your host, Catryn Becker, and on this podcast, we love to talk to successful people to figure out what are the failures that are behind them that led them to the success that they have today. Because while you can learn so much from your failures, and a smart person does that, a genius can learn from the mistakes of others. So we talk to these successful people so that we can learn these mistakes, either avoid them completely or we can fail faster through them. My guest today has a great story of how she found that silver lining and mined it and turned it into gold. Her name is Jean Criss, and she is the founder of Jean Criss Media and a brand called CrissCross. And we're going to learn all about that and how it came to be. Jean, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me today, Kat.
You have such a great story, and I love that, we all have had things that have happened in our past, and people can choose how they see it, whether they see it as a tragedy or they see it as a leaping off point for growth. Your story, you really saw it as a leaping point, a growth point in your story. So tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do, and then we'll dive into the juicy bits of the story.
All right, be happy to. So I started as as a corporate, a person in the corporate marketplace and in media, publishing, marketing, and today I'm an entrepreneur. I am an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a fashion designer, and I'm an innovator.
Mm.
So really how I got here today is from my background, from everything that I did in the past, but also from just really getting inspired from doing new and creative things. So I'd be happy to talk about some of that. A lot of it was from experiences, whether it be tragedy or whether it be health reasons or experiences in the workplace. And I learned from those experiences, and I realized that I can take some of what I learned and not just share them and learn for myself, but turn things into products and into things that can help others. So, more specifically, what I had learned in media and in publishing through the years, I kind of spun it as, let me take everything that I had produced in print publishing and online and digital and television and all of the mediums that I had worked with, and I created a portfolio of services for clients. And that's really how I drummed up Jean Criss Media when I got laid off from the corporate marketplace.
Well,
And I
I
just kind
love I
of,
love that you have, a lot of this stuff makes sense together in terms of working in media and publishing and being an author and a speaker. That all tracks, right? And seems like that's a progression that makes sense. But fashion designer seems to come out of left field a little bit. And I know we're going to talk about where that came from, but do you think if you hadn't gone through what you went through, that fashion designer would be part of your accolades?
I do, because it wasn't just creating breast cancer bras because I got breast cancer. Before that, I was a jewelry designer. And while I was in television, and I don't think we talked about that before,
No,
but
this is brand new
yeah,
information, hot off the
yeah, it was called Beaded Baubles, and I had a business for 7 years while I was in television. So, but I've always loved fashion. I've had a passion for fashion. I think my mom just kind of taught me to, dress nice and very conservative, I might say. But, as I got older, I got to, have my own style and, twist to things. But I always have had an eye on high-end fashion and colors and colorful things. And so when I was in an unhappy place in my life and I wanted to make a change, but I didn't know how to go about it. And this was at the beginning stages of before I got divorced. So I started beading, and I just started making bracelets and earrings. And, some of my neighbor friends would come over and they're like, wow, would you make me one? And would you make me one? And, can you make something custom like this for me? And before you knew it, I had this small little business going out of my home. And I was making all these Swarovski crystal bracelets and earrings, and it got to be pretty popular. And, I did them for the holidays and trunk shows and things like that. And then, you know, supported some of the local community festivals and things like that. And then I thought, you know what? I think I am pretty good at this. I started going to some of the New York uh, shows where you can buy in bulk and, buy sterling and some of the real gemstones and at wholesale. And then I started pitching in the Northeast to some of the retail stores. And my first client was Lily Pulitzer.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was, yeah, I landed a couple of their retail stores in New Jersey. And I just had secured that contract. And then their corporate offices had announced that they were coming out with their own line of jewelry.
Mm.
And so they had to pull back from all of the local contracts that they had just secured. So I was just getting started, but then it got pulled back. But it really gave me the confidence that I knew I was doing a good job, and I was fine with it. So I went and took all of my product and I put it into a retail store locally as well, and managed my own POP display. And so it was being sold there by the store that sold other merchant designer jewelry and accessories, things like that. And on the weekends, I would go and restock it, see what I needed to, make more of. And I expanded into purses and belts and some accessories, things that really still had beads, but I wasn't making I was making the belts, but I wasn't really making the purses. I was just accessorizing them. And I did that for 7 years. And it was just a little something different from producing television commercials and, managing teams of, salespeople and, making commercials throughout the New York footprint. And it kept me busy in the evenings when I was in an unhappy relationship. And until I could figure out how to move forward with my life when I had two young children at home and, was just trying to figure out how to move forward. And lo and behold, I ended up closing that business a month before I was diagnosed with bilateral breast cancer.
Mm.
So I think it was like a sign that I did the right thing, because then I needed time for myself.
Yeah.
So, I did that for 7 years, and I knew I was good at it, and I had fun and everything. But it was somewhat of a hobby, but yet it was, therapeutic, and it was a small business, and um, little 5-digit business, 5-figure business that just kind of was a little side business for me. And, it was just fun. So that was really my first entree into like a fashion business. And
But
then,
it's so interesting, and I hear this a lot with the women that I speak to, and other guests that I've had on here about this sort of idea that whatever our sort of main income or main thing that we do, our career, it's a lot to request that it fills us up in all of these different ways. It
mm,
always seems like there's something missing or not quite right that we seek out these other avenues to kind of fulfill us in other ways. And I know I wrestled with that of being like, well,
yeah,
I've got my main job, but then I've got like the side hustle, and side hustle never really felt like the right word either. But thinking
uh-huh.
of it as like a hobby that makes you money is kind of
Yeah.
a nice way to reframe it as well.
It was an outlet for me to, work off some excess energy, but yet put it into something that was for the good.
And
Was making
beautiful.
things, it was beautiful, beautiful product, and yet I was doing it for people that I liked and loved, neighbors and family and friends that really appreciated what I was doing. And, it gave me joy, and that's kind of what I needed during that time when I was in, a dark place.
Sure.
So, I think it taught me a lot, how to, just create a craft and move forward. And it also, now looking back, it really gave me the confidence to create any type of business, because from there I created a mobile device business. I innovated a mobile device, believe it or not, and I also innovated breast cancer line of undergarments. So who knew I had this creativity in me. I came from the corporate world, very strict business environment, managing, technology, then managing books and videos and conferences and executive events, and then moving into television and, working for big million and billion dollar companies. And, you do things their way and not your way. And then, finally, I just decided, hey, I think it's time that I start my own business. And I had a lot of clients that were always encouraging me to do it, but I never, I was always complimented by that, but I never really thought anything beyond that. When I finally did do that, I remember my former vice president of sales said to me, because I started this business, Jean Criss Media, in 30 days after I got laid off from television. He was like, "Oh, you've always thought of doing this, haven't you?" And I was like, "No, it's just, I think it's time, and I quickly created a media agency, and they were like, "Oh, you've been thinking about this for a long time." I'm like, "No, I haven't." you know
Maybe
but
subconsciously.
yeah, and I just figured out how to do it, and it wasn't that complicated. And I tried not to, I guess if I have any advice for people that are looking to start a business, don't get stuck in the minutia, don't get stuck thinking about all the complicated things, or try not to get overwhelmed in the process. Just take it one step at a time. Because
Yeah.
when you're a startup, you have to be hands-on with a lot of different things and juggle many different pieces of the business. Just tackle one step at a time and you'll get there. You don't have to do all of it at once. As an example, I wasn't focused when I first started on, bringing on board affiliate partners and, different types of third party, businesses to work with. I was just focusing on my own brand and, trying to get a website going and selling product myself, and, just very serial minded, very focused on, what my brand is and how I'm going to go to market with that strategy. And then you kind of can expand from there and decide what is the right market and, where you should go. And, you need to do that market research to figure those things out.
Yeah, one of the things that we've talked about on this podcast with other guests is the people who've transitioned from corporate into being an entrepreneur, that all the different parts of business, and just because you've been in corporate, it's different from running your own business. And for some people, that was a stumbling block. What kind of was your process coming into it? Did you find it very easy to make that transition, or were there things that you had to learn?
Well, yes, of course, there were a lot of things I had to learn. I I do remember when I was in publishing, the CEO that I worked for when I was managing a magazine, he sat me down and he taught me how to manage my first P&L. And that was really helpful because it helped me to learn how to manage my own business books, how to manage, managing, starting a business. When I think about how I went about like launching, learning about how to source fabric or find distributor partners, I really looked at, I guess I compared going out in the market, and I did travel around the US to find the right production partners and sourcing fabric and things like that. Was like what I was doing in the tech space, just meeting with different technology partners as we were working different distribution channels and, collaborating with different channel partners. So it was similar in that aspect, but now I was the client and now I was, the head of the business, going in there and making the requests of what I needed and seeing if they were the right fit versus vice versa. So, it's different role playing. I do have to say, probably working all sides of the business, I did work at an agency for a short stint in New York. So working the agency side, working the client side, and then, being the client, I think really gave me a good perspective
Mm,
of how to approach creating a product and creating a brand, because, now you kind of can come at it from many different angles. And, obviously having input from an advisory board and other people to provide you input to what you're creating is invaluable. But having that perspective yourself was really helpful to me.
absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Well, let's go back to what we kind of started with we've teased the audience enough, I would say. Let's let the listeners in. You did mention that you had the bilateral breast cancer. And,
Mhm.
breast cancer is something that affects millions of women.
Yeah.
Yet millions of women don't go on to create their own brand.
No. Yes.
So tell us about that journey and sort of what your mind frame was at that time that led you to do this in the midst of something that is a very challenging time.
Yeah. Yeah, it really was, I think, because my journey kind of carried on for about 4 years of surgeries on and off. Uh, it'd be a month on, and then, a couple months off, and then back on again. And it was because I had complications with my breast cancer surgeries and the procedures that I was having. And then I got infections. So I was constantly back in the OR room,
Mm,
required to wear these really uncomfortable, ugly utilitarian bras. And I was pretty much having surgeries on a Thursday if I could, and then returning to work on a Monday. And
mm,
I would try to hide the fact to my staff that I was, undergoing all these surgeries. I was just trying to, keep things moving along. And, I would wear my husband's dress shirts to try to hide these bras that were pretty much up to the neck, and white Velcro and zippers, and just really uncomfortable. And I was like, I feel like I'm in a straitjacket. Seriously, it was awful and uncomfortable. And then when I finally was able to wear a regular bra, um, I would find my bra straps this is when I actually had a double lumpectomy, which isn't very common in most women. I had bilateral breast cancer, and typically you just immediately get a mastectomy, right? But because I had small tumors, I thought, why go through that if I don't have to? So
sure.
I opted for 2 lumpectomies and radiation. Well, I couldn't continue down that path because I became allergic to the radiation
Mm,
with my skin. So 4 months later, I'm going back in and having, two, bilateral mastectomy. But while I had that um, double lumpectomy, my regular bras, I'd be in a sales meeting and I'm constantly pulling up my bra straps because, your breasts are different sizes and they just weren't fitting. So that was, I think, my first experience to not being happy with wearing regular bras. I mean, even though they weren't regular bras, but you know what I mean? They couldn't
right.
stay up. And then the ones that they gave you from the hospital I didn't like. So I had all these different experiences, and then I was going to different hospitals, and all the different products that they were giving me, they didn't care what they looked like. They didn't care how they felt on you, if you were comfortable or not. They were there to do the procedure. They were not there for the post recovery. And so whatever you walked out in, it was just what you were thrown and given to wear. And then you were expected to wear this 24/7 for, 2 to 3 weeks. And it was
Mm,
really uncomfortable. So I just had a lot of experience at that. And after 13 major surgeries, I was like, this sucks. I need to do something differently. So first I started documenting my journey, and I kind of outlined it all. And I wrote my book, My Pain Woke Me Up, Bliss. And bliss being, the outcome, the happiness. I'm done with all of it, right? I'm done with, I went through a lot of other things at the same time. Divorce, changing, getting laid off from the corporate marketplace, starting my own business. So it was my happy place and trying to move on in my life. But, little did I know I was still going to be dealing with having to wear bras for a while later. And by the time I finished publishing my first book, I said, gee, nobody has come out with, a better, more contemporary bra by now. I'm shocked. It's 4 years later. This isn't, there's a lot of great fashion that's out there. So I just decided one day I was in the hospital for 10 days to just kind of sketch out and draw what I wanted to wear. And that's how I started to create my line. And it all started from that. I think they always say a lot of inspiration comes from your own experiences, and that's really what happened. And I then created 20 different designs. I got them patented, and I really started that way. I created this full patented line, and now today I have a variety of designs that are in production and in the market, and others that I'm still have yet to be produced.
So if we kind of just zoom out, we started saying, there's millions of women that go through breast cancer. They're
Yeah.
all experiencing these incredibly uncomfortable bras and post-surgical garments. So you took that a step further and created the designs.
Mm-hmm.
Surely there is a percentage of women that have doodled out their designs and done the same thing.
Yeah.
Like that has to have happened, right?
Yeah.
But then that next step of like how do you go about patenting something? How do you go about finding the fabric and who stitches it together and like all of those next steps that you took? I feel like that's the real big deal.
Yeah.
What characteristics do you think are in your personality that helped you to keep going? Because like as you said, this is now 4 years after this
Mm-hmm.
experience. You're not living in this pain anymore. There's plenty of life and your kids and work and all these other things to take your attention away
Mm-hmm.
from doing that. What kept you going on that path?
I think I was just thriving on it. I wanted to keep learning and being. I really enjoyed being an entrepreneur and
Mm.
taking this step in my life. And I mentioned that I I never knew I had this creativity inside of me. I think dabbling in the beaded business, the jewelry business, was just an entree into what I knew was inside of me. I think if I had known that I had all of this creativity inside of me, maybe I would have done this right out of college. I don't know,
Mm.
instead of going in the direction that I did. But I spent the first 20, 25 years working for other people. And then, I became an entrepreneur. And I'm not saying that I did it wrong because I certainly learned a lot in leadership and sales and marketing and et cetera. But I didn't realize I had all of this in me. So then I just like went full speed ahead, and I I became a sponge, and I wanted to keep learning, and so I would take it in, and I had the confidence to just go out there and do it. I called top down from in the fashion industry to all the top executives, and figured out, navigated my way through whatever market segment I needed to make it happen. And within 18 months, I had my fashion brand created and in the market. Many people were shocked that I was able to do that, not coming from growing up in the fashion industry, right?
Sure.
And then, with my media business, I was able to start it and land clients within the first quarter that, I had it launched. So I think a lot of that had to do with just my background, because I knew, how to call on clients, and I was always very successful in my business career. So it really did play a part in it, even though I just never did it for myself before.
Mm.
The other part is, I think, a lot of it had to do with my dad. My dad was kind of a multitasker. I would say he was an entrepreneur, but but he wasn't. He was a dentist by day. He was a builder by day as well, but kind of, like on the weekends and by hobby. And he was a pianist, professional pianist.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, he had three great, careers for himself. And, my mom raised four kids, and he just was an inspiration to me because I learned a lot from him, and yet he still was a family man, and he spent, a lot of time with us. And so I think a lot of it came from just watching my dad, and I even worked for my dad when I was in high school, and, I realized I couldn't be a dental assistant. But, I did, learn a lot just working side by side with him and or in the office, and I just, I think a lot of it comes from, your blood or your family and, how you grew up and a lot of the values that are within, how you're brought into the world.
Do you have any regrets of things that you've done, or do you feel like they were all things you had to go through to get to where you are?
Um, let's see, regrets. I published my first couple of books for me. And
Mm.
I know a lot of people might have thought, a lot of people publish their books to just be New York Times bestsellers. Well, I didn't. I really did it to help me heal because I did go through a lot of pain. With all of the breast cancer, I went through a very contentious divorce, and then it continued post-divorce for a number of years. And I went through a lot of abuse with the divorce and afterwards. And so it was my way to heal. And so I wrote it the best that I could. I was never an author before, but I do have a communications degree. And I think I finally tapped into that part of my, background. And my fourth and fifth book, I think I learned, how to write a little bit better and, take what I learned from my trilogy that I first introduced and, write in a little bit different way and to share my stories and experiences, but kind of share them in a different light.
Hmm. Well, last question before we wrap up, but when do you feel successful?
I feel successful when I've accomplished something, whether it be for myself or for a project when I'm working on something for someone. So if I'm doing some writing work, some consulting work for someone, when I've completed the project and I've completed it to their satisfaction, I feel successful. I feel like I've listened to what they need. I've produced and delivered to them in a timely manner what they need. And, I'm ready to help them move on to the next step. And that's what I'm here for. I love to be able to share what I've learned, whether it be in media, fashion, publishing with others. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm trying to market my services to other companies and as a business consultant and share those experiences with others and consult and speak and be hired on panels and things like that. Yeah.
I love that. And I love asking people about when do they feel successful because we kind of think of success as like this like final destination, like, when I have this amount of money or when I have this
Right.
job. But I think success can be something we experience all the time.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
love thinking of it in that way.
It's not just the pocketbook. I mean, I've been, able to do a lot with my life. I've been successful, so I don't think about. I've been a woman-owned business, self-funded all of my businesses. So, I'm proud of what I've done, but it's not just about that. I guess I think of success as being, being able to to listen to others and to support them, being able to provide the reason I created the whole breast cancer line was to make other survivors more comfortable with what they could wear because I wasn't. So that's just one way of myself giving back. So if there's other ways to, share and learn from your experiences, that's what I enjoy doing. So whether it's selling one bra at a time, or whether it's, creating one media plan, or, providing a marketing strategy to somebody, it's really, being able to share that experience and help them grow. Because I've done a lot of that myself.
Yeah, yeah, it's so nice being able to give back. So with all that you do,
Mhm.
who would be the perfect person, who's going for you to work with, and in which sort of capacity, and how can they reach out to you?
Yeah. Well, I am looking for new clients. I'm able to handle some large scale projects. So if there's a company out there that needs some help, I'm now certified in artificial intelligence. I've worked with a variety of different apps. I'm certified in many different media capacities and certifications and licenses. I'm also certified as a government contractor, so on the state, local, and federal level.
Wow.
So if there are some businesses out there that might need my help, give me a ring, and you can reach me at on LinkedIn at Jean Criss, or you can reach me on my website at jeancrissmedia.com, and that's without an H. And people throw an H in my name all the time, and my
They do
contact.
the same thing for me too. They think my name is Catryn.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And
So,
I
and
will
my
have all of that
email and phone is
information.
there.
I will have
Okay.
all that information in the show notes as well.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for having me, Kat. This was
Gosh,
great.
yes, thank you so much for being here. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I feel like the more I talk to you, the more like you just mentioned like, oh, by the way, I also did this and I also did that. Like it's so normal for you that it's really incredible.
Thank you. I know a lot of people are like, are you sure you're not just going to focus in one area? I'm like, no, this is me, and this is what I enjoy doing.
And shouldn't that be the goal, right? To know who
Yeah,
we are and figure out what we love and do it.
and do it. Be doers, change makers.
Exactly. Well, and to the listeners, I know you enjoyed this episode as much as I did in recording it. Please make sure to like it, share it with someone who might also enjoy it, subscribe so that you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time, everyone, take care.
Thanks, Kat.